Hi. My last video about being kissed without consent and about how that lands in a body that's been violated before really struck a chord. So many of you shared your own experiences, and thank you so much for that. I don't take that lightly. Reading your comments reminded me of something from my own past that fits directly into this conversation. And I also want to be clear about something. This channel isn't about sexual assault. It's about lived experience, power, embodiment, healing, and how life actually shapes us. Sexual boundary violations are one part of my story, not the focus of this channel, but relevant when they help explain the patterns we carry and the choices we make. I want to say this first very clearly. I do not see myself as a victim anymore. I used to. I've done a lot of healing and much of the pain from my past have resolved. But that doesn't mean the stories stop mattering. Even when trauma has been integrated, the experiences themselves still have something to teach us. Talking about them helps us see patterns, and it also helps us see how far we've come. So today, I want to share something that happened to me when I was 16 or 17 years old, when I dreamed of becoming a journalist. What was considered normal back then says a lot about power, consent, and the toxic culture many of us grew up in. And hopefully it's better today. Let me know. At the time, I was living in Denmark. My father was a well-known actor and entertainer, and through his work, he knew people in the media world. One of them was the chief editor of the biggest gossip magazine in the country. My father put in a good word for me, hoping that it would lead to an apprenticeship. Not long after, I attended a reception for a new nightclub. My father brought me along and introduced me to this chief editor. During the conversation with him, he sat down in a chair, patted his lap and said, "Come, sit here." I was young and I felt uncomfortable, and I did it anyway. He looked at me and he said, "Your father tells me you want to be a journalist. You're beautiful and smart. I could be interested in giving you an apprenticeship. Would you like that?" And I was completely blown away. Of course. I said yes, I smiled, I was excited. I even hugged him because I thought something incredible was happening. And then he said, "I rented a room up on the 7th floor of this hotel. If you come up there with me tonight, we have a deal." Everything in me dropped. My body tensed, and at the same time, it felt like it went limp. For a brief moment, and I'm saying this totally honestly, totally honest, I actually considered it. I wanted that opportunity so badly. But I did say no. I told him I didn't want that. He touched my thigh again, and he said, almost casually, "Well, okay, if you don't want it, you don't want it. Plenty of other girls will." And then he sent me on my way. Later, I told my father what had happened, and his response was anger, not at the man, but at me. He said, "I called in a favor for you. Why would you say no? Are you stupid? I thought you really wanted to be a journalist." When I said I didn't want to have sex with the man, he told me that this was normal. He knew many women who had done exactly that. And it was just one night to get ahead. At that age, I didn't have the language or the tools to say what I know now, that it should never have been that way. What made it even harder was telling some of my girlfriends, girls my own age, and hearing a few of them say, "Why not just do it? It doesn't mean that much. It's just one night." That kind of response teaches us something very dangerous. It teaches us that boundaries are negotiable, that our discomfort is the price of opportunity, that women's bodies are commodities. Looking back, I'm deeply grateful that I said no. What a slippery slope it could have been. And of course, it wouldn't have stopped at one night. Men like that, they don't stop once they know they can get away with it. The favors keep coming. The demand keeps escalating. And I've since then, I've heard from other women, and this wasn't unique to me. It wasn't unique for me. He did that to many. And of course, that wasn't even an isolated environment. I was at parties in those years with editors, journalists, actors, photographers, and other powerful people. And there were always drugs. There were always female sex workers brought in as entertainment. Sex was a currency. That's why the Me Too movement mattered so much. In Denmark, a major wave began around 2020, sparked by women finally speaking openly about harassment and abuse of power. Similar reckonings happened in many, many countries, and I'm so happy they did. These stories weren't new. What was new was that they were finally being believed. Growing up, men grabbing women, making sexual comments, treating us as available and commodities, it wasn't shocking. It was normalized. And when something is normalized, it shapes your nervous system. Repeated violations teach the body to freeze, to go numb, to disconnect. Healing isn't just about moving on. It's about rewiring conditioning through therapy, boundaries, and telling the truth, even years later. If something like this happened to me today, I would respond very differently. I would say something right then and there, and it would not be pretty. I would trust my body. I would protect myself. If you're watching this and you're feeling recognition, you're not alone. We've come a long way, and this is still relevant, unfortunately. I also want to name something that surprised and concerned me while preparing this. When I tried to talk about parts of this experience with AI tools like ChatGPT and Gemini, I received messages saying the content violated their policies. I understand the intention to prevent harm, and at the same time, I find it deeply troubling. Many people feel deep shame around experiences like this, even though it was never their fault. For some, talking to an AI feels safer than talking to a human as a first step. If we can't speak about lived experiences like this carefully, reflectively, without sensationalism, even in private or semi-private spaces, then we have to ask, where do people go first? And who gets left alone with their stories? Me Too isn't over. It's maturing, and we need to create room for healing. Your no matters. Your body knows. And you don't owe anyone access in exchange for opportunity. Thank you for listening. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.